The stagecoach lurched violently as another gust of wind slammed into its wooden frame, and Sarah Olsen pressed her gloved hands against the frosted window, watching the world outside transform into a swirling white nightmare that seemed determined to erase every landmark from existence. She had traveled 3 weeks from Boston to become the bride of a cattle rancher she had never met, and now, just hours from her destination in Llano, Texas, the impossible was happening. Snow in Texas. A blizzard so fierce that even the driver was shouting curses at the heavens, his voice barely audible over the howling wind. "We cannot go on," the driver bellowed, pulling the horses to a shuddering halt. "The road is gone, the markers buried. We will freeze if we try to push through." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she clutched her carpetbag closer. Inside were all her worldly possessions, including the letters from Marcus Pritchard, the man who had promised her a new life far from the suffocating expectations of Boston society. She was 22 years old, well-educated, and entirely unsuitable for the life her parents had planned for her. When the advertisement for a mail-order bride had appeared in the newspaper, it had seemed like divine intervention. Now, she wondered if she had simply traded one form of death for another. There, the guard riding shotgun pointed through the white curtain of snow. "I see a structure. Could be a lined shack or homestead." The driver urged the horses forward at a crawl, and Sarah could barely make out the dark shape materializing through the blizzard. It was a cabin, small but solid-looking, with smoke rising from a stone chimney. The sight of it filled her with such relief that tears pricked at her eyes. The stagecoach pulled up as close as possible, and the driver jumped down, his boots sinking into snow that was already knee-deep. He yanked open the door. "Miss, you will need to take shelter here. I cannot risk the horses or the mail. We will push on to the way station 5 miles back. When the storm clears, someone will come for you. You are leaving me here alone." Sarah's voice rose in panic. "Someone is here. See the smoke. They will give you shelter. It is your only chance." He was already pulling her trunk from the top of the coach, his movements urgent. Sarah had no choice. She gathered her skirts and stepped down into the brutal cold, gasping as the wind stole her breath. The driver practically carried her trunk to the cabin door and pounded on it with his fist. Sarah stood shivering, her fine wool traveling suit already soaked through. The door swung open, revealing a man who seemed carved from the same rough timber as his cabin. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes the color of a summer sky, though right now they were narrowed against the wind. He wore a simple flannel shirt and work-worn jeans, and there was a bandage wrapped around his left hand. "Storm caught us," the driver shouted. "The lady needs shelter. Can you take her?" The man's gaze swept over Sarah, and something flickered in his expression, something she could not quite read. Then he nodded. "Get her inside before she freezes." The driver deposited her trunk just inside the door and tipped his hat. "God be with you, miss." Then he was gone, the stagecoach disappearing into the white void before Sarah could protest. She stood dripping on the rough wooden floor, suddenly aware that she was alone with a complete stranger in the middle of a blizzard. The cabin was a single room, sparsely furnished but clean. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, and there was a narrow bed in one corner, a small table with 2 chairs, and shelves lined with supplies. A pot of something that smelled heavenly bubbled over the fire. The man closed the door against the wind and turned to face her. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the weathering of sun and hard work on his face. He was perhaps 27 or 28, and there was a wariness in his expression that suggested he was no more pleased about this situation than she was. "I am sorry for the intrusion," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. I would not have imposed if there had been any other choice. No apology needed. Storm like this, you do not turn anyone away. His voice was low with the slow drawl of Texas. I am Jasper Zimmerman. This is my line shack. I was checking fence lines when the weather turned. Sarah Olsen. I was on my way to Lano. I am to be married to Marcus Pritchard. She did not know why she felt the need to establish that fact immediately, except that the cabin seemed very small with just the two of them in it. Something changed in Jasper's expression at the mention of Marcus's name, but it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. Pritchard. You are his mail-order bride. It was not a question, and there was a flatness to his tone that made Sarah bristle. Yes, do you know him? Everyone knows everyone in these parts. Jasper moved to the fireplace and ladled something from the pot into a tin cup. You are soaked through. Get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death. There are some dry things in that trunk by the bed. They will be too big, but better than freezing. Sarah looked at the trunk he indicated, then back at him. Her teeth were chattering now, the cold seeping into her bones. Jasper seemed to read her hesitation. I will step outside and check on the horses. In this storm, I have weathered worse. He grabbed a heavy coat from a peg by the door and pulled it on, then wrapped a scarf around his face. Change quickly. You do not have much time before the cold does real damage. He went out into the blizzard, and Sarah did not waste a moment. Her fingers were numb and clumsy as she struggled with the tiny buttons of her traveling suit. She finally managed to peel off the sodden layers, down to her chemise and petticoats, which were also damp. She opened the trunk and found men's clothes, all clean and well worn. She pulled on a soft flannel shirt that hung to her knees and thick wool socks that came up to her thighs. There were trousers, but she could not bring herself to wear them. The shirt would have to do. She had just draped her wet clothes over the chairs near the fire when the door opened and Jasper came back in, stamping snow from his boots. He glanced at her, taking in her bare legs beneath the oversized shirt, and quickly looked away. Horses are in the lean-to, they will be all right. He moved to the fire and held out his hands to warm them. Storm is getting worse. We might be here a few days. A few days. Sarah's heart sank. Marcus would be expecting her. Would he think she had changed her mind? Would he give up on her? Cannot fight nature, Miss Olsen. We wait it out or we die trying to leave. Those are the only choices. Sarah sank onto one of the chairs, pulling the shirt down as far as it would go. I understand. And please call me Sarah. Given the circumstances, formality seems unnecessary. Jasper nodded. He poured the hot liquid into another cup and brought it to her. Beef broth. It will warm you from the inside. Sarah wrapped her hands around the cup, grateful for the heat. The broth was rich and salty, and she drank it slowly, feeling warmth begin to return to her body. Jasper settled into the other chair, cradling his own cup. How did you hurt your hand? Sarah asked, noting the bandage again. Jasper glanced down at it. Barbed wire. Caught it while mending a fence. Nothing serious. It should be cleaned properly. Infections are dangerous out here, I imagine. I cleaned it. But there was something in his tone that suggested he had not been as thorough as he should have been. Sarah set down her cup. May I look at it? I helped nurse my father through pneumonia last year. I am not a doctor, but I know something about wound care. Jasper hesitated, then held out his hand. Sarah carefully unwound the bandage, revealing a deep gash across his palm that was red and inflamed around the edges. She drew in a sharp breath. This is infected. Do you have any whiskey for drinking or cleaning? Both, I suspect. Sarah looked up at him and their eyes met. His were a startling blue, and there was an intensity in them that made her pulse quicken. Jasper retrieved a bottle from a high shelf and handed it to her. Sarah poured some of the whiskey over the wound, and Jasper hissed in pain but did not pull away. She worked carefully, cleaning the gash as thoroughly as she could, then tore a strip from one of her petticoats to make a clean bandage. "You will need to keep this clean and change the bandage daily," she said as she wrapped his hand. "If the redness spreads, you must see a doctor." "Yes, madam." There was a hint of amusement in his voice now. Sarah finished tying off the bandage and realized she was still holding his hand. She released it quickly and sat back. "I am sorry. I did not mean to be bossy." "You were not being bossy, you were being helpful. There is a difference." Jasper flexed his hand carefully. "Thank you." The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters. The cabin was warm, but Sarah could feel the cold trying to seep in through every crack and crevice. She looked around the small space and realized the full reality of her situation. She was trapped here with a man she did not know, with only one bed and no privacy. "You can take the bed," Jasper said, as if reading her thoughts. "I will make a pallet by the fire." "I cannot take your bed." "You can and you will. That is not up for discussion." His tone was firm but not unkind. "You need rest after your journey. I am used to sleeping rough." Sarah wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her, the warmth of the cabin and the hot broth making her eyelids heavy. "Thank you, Jasper." He nodded and turned away, busying himself with stoking the fire. Sarah went to the bed and crawled under the heavy quilts. They smelled like wood smoke and leather and something else, something masculine that made her acutely aware that she was wearing a stranger's shirt and sleeping in his bed. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about Marcus Pritchard, the man she was supposed to marry. Instead, her last thought before sleep claimed her was of blue eyes and strong, careful hands. Sarah woke to the sound of wind still raging outside and the smell of coffee brewing. Gray light filtered through the cracks in the shutters, suggesting it was morning, though it was hard to tell with the storm still in full force. She sat up, disoriented, and saw Jasper crouched by the fire, tending to a skillet. "Morning," he said without turning around. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I expected." Sarah pushed her hair back from her face, suddenly conscious of how she must look. "Is the storm still as bad? Worse? I have never seen anything like it, not here in Texas." He glanced over his shoulder at her. "There is water in the basin if you want to wash up." "Breakfast will be ready in a few minutes." Sarah slipped out of bed and padded over to the small washstand in the corner. She washed her face and hands, then attempted to do something with her hair, which had escaped its pins during the night. She managed to braid it over one shoulder, though she had no mirror to check her work. Jasper dished up eggs and salt pork onto 2 tin plates, and they sat at the small table to eat. The food was simple but good, and Sarah realized she was ravenous. "Tell me about Boston," Jasper said after a few minutes of silence. "What made you decide to come all the way to Texas to marry a man you have never met?" Sarah set down her fork, considering how much to reveal. "My parents wanted me to marry a banker named Harold Wentworth. He was 45 years old, had already buried 2 wives, and looked at me the way one might look at a brood mare. I could not do it. When I saw the advertisement, it seemed like the only escape." "So you traded one stranger for another?" "Perhaps, but at least this was my choice." Sarah met his gaze. "What about you? Why are you out here alone checking fence lines instead of home with a wife and family?" Jasper's expression shuddered. "I work for the Triple Z Ranch. The line shacks are part of the job during winter. Someone has to check the fences and watch for cattle in distress." "That is not what I asked." "No, it is not." Jasper stood and gathered the plates. "Some questions do not have easy answers." Sarah sensed she had touched on something painful and let it drop. The day stretched ahead of them, long and awkward. They were 2 strangers trapped in a small space with nothing to do but wait for the storm to pass. To fill the time, Sarah retrieved a book from her carpet bag, a volume of poetry she had brought from Boston. Jasper busied himself with small tasks, checking his gear, organizing supplies. But as the hours passed, the silence became less uncomfortable. Sarah found herself watching him when she thought he was not looking, noting the careful way he moved, the competence in everything he did. "Read something aloud," Jasper said suddenly, startling her. "What? Your book. Read something. It has been a long time since I heard poetry." Sarah opened the book, searching for something appropriate. She settled on a piece by Longfellow and began to read, her voice soft in the quiet cabin. Jasper stopped what he was doing and listened, his expression distant. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "My mother used to read to us, before she died." "How old were you?" 12. "Fever took her one winter. My father followed 2 years later. Broke his neck when his horse threw him." Jasper's voice was matter-of-fact, but Sarah heard the old pain beneath it. "I am sorry. That must have been terribly hard. It was a long time ago." Jasper moved to the window and peered out through a gap in the shutters. "Snow is piling up against the walls. I need to dig us out before we are completely buried." He bundled up and went outside, and Sarah could hear the scrape of a shovel against wood. She felt restless, useless. She was not accustomed to sitting idle while others worked. She looked around the cabin and noticed the pile of clothes in the corner, clothes that clearly needed mending. Without asking permission, she found a sewing kit among the supplies and set to work. When Jasper came back in, stamping snow from his boots, he stopped short at the sight of her with needle and thread. "You do not have to do that, I know, but I wanted to be useful. Besides, it gives me something to do besides worry." Sarah held up a shirt with a torn seam. "You are hard on your clothes. Ranch work is not easy on anything." Jasper hung up his coat and came to stand by the fire, warming his hands. "Thank you." They fell into a routine over the next hours. Jasper kept the fire going and the cabin dug out from the snow. Sarah cooked what she could with the limited supplies and mended clothes. They talked in fits and starts, sharing small pieces of their lives. Sarah learned that Jasper had been working at the Triple Z Ranch for 5 years, that he was saving money to buy his own land someday, that he preferred the solitude of the line shacks to the chaos of the bunkhouse. Jasper learned that Sarah had taught herself French and could play the piano, that she loved books and hated needlepoint, that she had 3 younger sisters who thought she was insane for going west. The more they talked, the more comfortable they became with each other. The awkwardness faded, replaced by something that felt almost like friendship. By the second evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Sarah found herself wondering what Marcus Pritchard would be like. Would he be kind? Would they find this same easy companionship? She had studied his letters so many times she had them memorized, but letters could only tell you so much about a person. "You are thinking about him," Jasper said quietly. "Pritchard." Sarah looked up, startled. "How did you know?" "You get a certain look on your face. Worried, uncertain." Jasper poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling up the chimney. "For what it is worth, he is a successful rancher. He has money and land. You will be well provided for." "That is not what I am worried about." "What then?" Sarah hesitated, then decided there was no point in hiding the truth. "What if we do not suit each other? What if I have traveled all this way only to find that we are completely incompatible?" Jasper was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. "Pritchard is not a bad man. He is fair to his workers and honest in his dealings. But he is hard. The land makes men hard. You will need to be strong if you are going to be his wife." There was something in the way he said it, some undercurrent Sarah could not quite identify. "You do not think I can be?" "I did not say that." Jasper looked at her then, really looked at her, and Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I think you are stronger than you know. You left everything familiar to start a new life. That takes courage, or desperation." "Sometimes they are the same thing." Jasper stood abruptly. "I am going to check on the horses one more time before bed." He left, and Sarah sat staring at the fire, her thoughts in turmoil. There was something happening between them, something she did not quite understand. She was engaged to marry another man, yet she found herself thinking about Jasper far too often, wondering what his smile would look like if he truly let himself smile, noticing the way his shoulders filled out his shirt, feeling her breath catch when their hands accidentally touched. It was foolish, dangerous. She barely knew him, but in the close confines of the cabin, trapped by the storm, it was impossible to ignore the growing connection between them. The third day dawned with the storm still raging. Sarah woke to find Jasper already up, standing by the window with a troubled expression. "What is wrong?" she asked, pulling the quilt around her shoulders. "We are running low on firewood. The storm has lasted longer than I anticipated. I am going to have to go out to the woodpile and bring back more. Is it safe?" "Safe enough if I am careful, but the snow is deep and the wind is brutal. I will rope myself to the cabin so I do not lose my way." Sarah felt a flutter of fear. "Please be careful." Jasper looked at her, and something passed between them, something unspoken but powerful. "I will be." He bundled up in every layer he could find, then tied a rope around his waist and secured the other end to a support beam near the door. Sarah watched anxiously as he stepped out into the white fury of the storm. She could barely see him through the blowing snow, just a dark shape moving slowly away from the cabin. Minutes passed like hours. Sarah paced the small space, her heart hammering. What if he fell? What if the rope broke? What if he froze out there and she could not reach him? She was about to grab her own coat and go after him when the door burst open and Jasper stumbled in, his arms loaded with wood. He was covered in snow, his face red from the cold. Sarah rushed to help him, taking the wood and stacking it by the fireplace while he shook off the snow. "That was terrifying," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "I thought you were not coming back." Jasper unwound the rope from his waist with stiff fingers. "Takes more than a storm to kill me." But when Sarah looked at him, she saw that he was trembling, whether from cold or exertion she could not tell. "You need to warm up. Take off those wet things." Jasper shed his coat and outer layers, and Sarah saw that his lips were tinged blue. Without thinking, she grabbed one of the quilts from the bed and wrapped it around his shoulders, then guided him to the chair closest to the fire. "Stay there. I will make hot coffee." She busied herself with the coffee pot, her hands shaking slightly. When she brought him the steaming cup, he took it gratefully, wrapping both hands around it. "Thank you," he said quietly. Sarah knelt beside his chair, unable to stop herself from reaching out to touch his face, checking for frostbite. Her fingers were gentle as they traced along his cheekbones, his jaw. "You scared me." Jasper caught her hand, holding it against his face. "I am sorry. I did not mean to." They stayed like that for a moment, frozen in time, and Sarah felt something shift between them. It was no longer just companionship or friendship. It was something deeper, something that made her heart race and her breath come short. "Sarah," Jasper said, his voice rough. We should not, I know." But Sarah did not pull away. "You are engaged to another man." "I know that too." Jasper released her hand and stood abruptly, putting distance between them. "This is not right. You do not know me. You do not know anything about me. I know that you are kind. I know that you risked your life just now to keep us from freezing. I know that you gave me your bed and your clothes and asked for nothing in return." Sarah stood as well, her voice steady despite the emotions churning inside her. I know that in 3 days I have felt more comfortable with you than I ever felt in 22 years in Boston. That is the storm talking, the situation. When this is over and you meet Pritchard, you will see things differently. Will I? Sarah took a step toward him. Or will I spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been? Jasper closed his eyes and Sarah saw the war raging inside him. When he opened them again, there was such longing in his expression that it took her breath away. I cannot offer you what he can, Jasper said. I am just a ranch hand. I have nothing but dreams and a few dollars saved. Pritchard can give you a house, security, a real future. I do not care about those things. You say that now, but when winter comes and you are cold and hungry, you will care. When you have children to feed and clothe, you will care. Jasper's voice was hard, but Sarah could hear the pain beneath it. I will not let you throw away your future for something that happened because we were trapped together in a storm. You think this is just because of the storm. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. You think I do not know my own mind. I think you are young and scared and far from home. I think you are looking for any reason not to go through with marrying a stranger. Jasper turned away from her, and I think I am the worst kind of man for taking advantage of that. You are not taking advantage of anything. Sarah's voice rose. I am the one who, she stopped, swallowing hard. I am the one who cannot stop thinking about you. I am the one who lies in that bed at night listening to you breathe and wishing things were different. The confession hung in the air between them. Jasper stood with his back to her, his shoulders rigid. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I wish things were different too. Sarah's heart soared and broke at the same time. Then why? Because wishing does not change reality. Jasper turned to face her, and Sarah saw that his eyes were bright with unshed tears. You made a commitment to Pritchard. He is waiting for you, expecting you. I will not be the man who ruins that for him or for you. Even if I want you to, especially if you want me to. Jasper's voice was gentle but firm. Sarah, I have nothing to offer you but hardship. I cannot in good conscience ask you to give up security and comfort for a life of struggle. What if I am willing to struggle? That is not a decision you can make in 3 days trapped in a cabin. That is a decision that takes time and thought and understanding of what you would be giving up. Jasper crossed to the window and stared out at the storm. When this is over, you will go to Pritchard. You will give him a fair chance. And if, after you have spent time with him, you still feel this way, then we can talk. But not before. Sarah wanted to argue, to rage against the unfairness of it all. But she could see the resolve in Jasper's face, the determination born of honor and principle. He was right, even if she hated admitting it. She had made a promise to Marcus Pritchard, and she needed to honor that promise before she could consider anything else. All right, she said quietly. I will give him a fair chance. Jasper nodded, relief and regret warring in his expression. Thank you. The rest of the day was strained. They moved around each other carefully, avoiding unnecessary contact, speaking only when necessary. Sarah felt as if something precious had been offered and then snatched away, leaving her aching with loss for something she had never truly had. That night, lying in Jasper's bed and listening to him shift restlessly on his pallet by the fire, Sarah thought about Marcus Pritchard and the future that awaited her. She tried to feel excited, hopeful. Instead, she felt only a growing sense of dread. The fourth morning brought a change. Sarah woke to silence, a silence so profound it was almost shocking after days of howling wind. She sat up and saw Jasper already at the window, throwing open the shutters to reveal a world transformed. The sun was shining, brilliant against endless white. The snow had stopped. It is over, Jasper said, and Sarah could not tell if there was relief or regret in his voice. They spent the morning digging out the cabin and assessing the damage. The snow was waist-deep in places, drifted higher in others. The cold was bitter, but the sky was clear, and Sarah knew it was only a matter of time before someone came to collect her. She was right. By afternoon, they heard the jingle of harness and the crunch of snow under wagon wheels. Jasper went to the door and Sarah followed, her heart sinking as she saw a large wagon pulled by 4 sturdy horses making its way toward the cabin. A man sat in the driver's seat, bundled against the cold. "That will be one of Pritchard's men," Jasper said quietly. "He will have sent someone to look for you as soon as the storm cleared." The wagon pulled up and the driver jumped down. He was a middle-aged man with a weathered face and kind eyes. "Miss Olsen, Marcus Pritchard sent me to find you. We heard the stagecoach had to turn back and leave a passenger." "Are you all right?" "I am fine, thank you. Mr. Zimmerman here gave me shelter." The driver tipped his hat to Jasper. "Zimmerman, good to see you made it through. That was some storm." "That it was." Jasper's voice was neutral. "Miss Olsen's trunk is inside. I will fetch it." He disappeared into the cabin, and the driver helped Sarah into the wagon, settling warm blankets around her. When Jasper emerged with her trunk, he loaded it into the back without meeting her eyes. "Thank you for everything," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I am grateful for your kindness." Jasper finally looked at her, and Sarah saw everything he was not saying in his eyes. "You are welcome. I hope you find happiness, Sarah." The use of her first name, spoken so softly, nearly broke her. "Goodbye, Jasper." The wagon pulled away, and Sarah twisted in her seat to watch the cabin grow smaller behind them. Jasper stood in the doorway, a solitary figure against the snow, and Sarah felt tears slip down her cheeks. The driver was kind enough to pretend not to notice. The ride to the Pritchard ranch took 2 hours, and with every mile, Sarah felt her anxiety grow. What would Marcus be like in person? Would he be angry that she had been delayed? Would he sense that something had changed in her during those 4 days in the cabin? The Pritchard ranch was impressive, far larger than Sarah had imagined. The main house was a sprawling 2-story structure with a wide porch and multiple outbuildings. Cattle dotted the snow-covered fields, and there were at least a dozen men working around the property. This was a successful operation, exactly as Jasper had said. The wagon pulled up in front of the house, and the door opened before Sarah could even climb down. A man stepped out onto the porch, and Sarah got her first look at her intended husband. Marcus Pritchard was tall and solidly built, probably in his mid-30s, with brown hair graying at the temples and a well-trimmed beard. He was handsome in a rugged way, dressed in fine clothes that spoke of his success. His eyes were dark brown, assessing as they swept over her. "Miss Olsen," he said, coming down the steps, "I am relieved to see you safe. I was worried when I heard about the storm." "Thank you, Mr. Pritchard. I apologize for the delay." "No apology necessary. Nature waits for no one." He took her hand and helped her down from the wagon. His grip was firm, his hand warm. "Please come inside. You must be exhausted." The house was beautiful, furnished with pieces that must have been shipped from back east at great expense. A housekeeper, a stout Mexican woman named Rosa, showed Sarah to a guest room on the 2nd floor. It was spacious and comfortable, with a real bed and a view of the mountains in the distance. "Mr. Pritchard says you should rest," Rosa said in accented English. "I will bring you hot water for a bath and then supper." "Thank you, Rosa." Alone in the room, Sarah sank onto the bed and let herself feel the full weight of everything that had happened. She was here, in Marcus Pritchard's house, about to begin the life she had traveled so far to find. She should be happy, relieved. Instead, she felt numb. The bath helped, and so did the hot meal Rosa brought on a tray. Sarah changed into one of her own dresses, grateful to be in clothes that fit properly, and tried to prepare herself for the evening ahead. Marcus knocked on her door at 7 o'clock. "May I come in?" "Of course." He entered, carrying a glass of wine which he offered to her. "I thought you might like this. It helps settle the nerves." Sarah accepted it gratefully and took a sip. Marcus settled into the chair by the window, studying her with those assessing eyes. "You are even lovelier than your photograph suggested," he said. "I am a fortunate man." "Thank you." Sarah felt awkward, unsure how to respond. "Your home is beautiful. I have worked hard to build this ranch. I want a wife to share it with, children to leave it to." Marcus leaned forward. "I will be honest with you, Miss Olsen. I am not a young man anymore. I'm not looking for romance or courtship games. I need a partner, someone who can run a household and raise a family. In return, I will provide for you and treat you with respect. Does that suit you?" It was a business proposition, plain and simple. Sarah should have appreciated his directness. Instead, she felt something shrivel inside her. "It sounds very reasonable." "Good. Then I propose we marry next week. The circuit preacher will be passing through, and there is no point in a long engagement. You are here, I am here, and we both know what we want." Marcus stood. "I will let you rest now. We can discuss the details tomorrow." He left, and Sarah sat staring at the closed door, the wine forgotten in her hand. This was what she had agreed to, what she had traveled across the country for. A practical marriage to a successful man. Security. Stability. Everything she should want, so why did it feel like a trap? The next few days passed in a blur. Marcus was attentive but businesslike, showing her around the ranch and introducing her to the staff. He outlined his expectations clearly. She would manage the household, entertain guests when necessary, and provide him with children. In return, she would want for nothing. It should have been enough. It was not. Sarah found herself thinking about Jasper constantly, wondering what he was doing if he was thinking about her. At night, she lay in her comfortable bed and remembered the rough quilts in the cabin, the sound of the fire crackling, the way Jasper's voice had sounded when he said her name. The wedding was planned for Saturday. Rosa helped Sarah alter one of her better dresses to serve as a wedding gown. Marcus ordered food and drink from town for a small celebration afterward. Everything was arranged with ruthless efficiency. On Thursday evening, Sarah sat on the porch watching the sunset and trying to convince herself that she was doing the right thing. She heard the sound of a rider approaching and looked up to see Jasper on horseback, coming up the drive. Her heart leapt into her throat. She stood, gripping the porch rail as he dismounted and tied his horse. He looked up and saw her, and even from a distance she could see the intensity in his gaze. "Sarah," he said, climbing the steps, "I need to talk to you." "Jasper, what are you doing here? If Marcus sees you, I do not care if he sees me." Jasper stood before her, his hat in his hands. "I cannot do this. I cannot let you marry him without telling you the truth." "What truth?" "That I have not stopped thinking about you since you left. That every night I lie awake remembering the way you looked in my shirt, the sound of your voice reading poetry, the feel of your hand on my face." Jasper's voice was rough with emotion. "That I am in love with you, Sarah, and I do not care that I have no right to be." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. "Jasper, I know what I said in the cabin. I know I told you to give Pritchard a fair chance, and maybe you have. Maybe you have spent these days here and realized that he can give you everything you need. If that is true, then I will leave and never bother you again. But if there is even a chance that you feel the same way I do, then I am here to fight for you. I am here to ask you not to marry him." Sarah could barely breathe. "I do not know what to say. Say you do not love him, say you feel something for me. That is all I need to hear." The front door opened behind them and Marcus stepped out onto the porch. His expression was cold as he took in the scene before him. Zimmerman. What are you doing on my property? Jasper straightened, not backing down despite the fact that Marcus was his employer's neighbor and a powerful man in these parts. I am here to speak with Miss Olsen. Miss Olsen is my intended bride. She has nothing to say to you. That is for her to decide, not you. Jasper turned back to Sarah. Tell me to go and I will. Tell me you want to marry him and I will leave and never speak of this again. But if you have any doubt, any at all, then do not do this. Do not marry a man you do not love just because it seems safe. Marcus moved between them, his face dark with anger. You are out of line, Zimmerman. Sarah and I have an agreement. She came here to be my wife, not to be swayed by a penniless ranch hand with delusions of grandeur. I would rather be penniless with a woman who loves me than rich with one who settled, Jasper shot back. Enough. Sarah's voice cut through their argument. Both men turned to look at her, and she realized that this was the moment of truth. She could choose safety, security, the life she had planned. Or she could choose uncertainty and struggle and the man who made her heart sing. She looked at Marcus, seeing him clearly for the first time. He was not a bad man. He was honest and successful and would likely make her comfortable. But there was no warmth in his eyes when he looked at her, no tenderness. She would always be a means to an end for him, a way to fill a role he needed filled. Then she looked at Jasper, at the hope and fear warring in his expression, at the way his hands trembled slightly as he held his hat. She thought about the 4 days in the cabin, the easy companionship, the feeling of rightness when she was near him. She thought about the way he had risked his life in the storm, the way he had put her needs above his own again and again. And she knew. I am sorry, Marcus, Sarah said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I cannot marry you. It would not be fair to either of us. Marcus's face went rigid. You are making a mistake, perhaps, but it is my mistake to make. Sarah turned to Jasper. I do not know what the future holds. I do not know if we can make this work, but I want to try. I want to be with you, whatever that means. Jasper's face transformed, joy breaking across his features like sunrise. He took a step toward her, then seemed to remember where they were and stopped. Are you certain? I am certain that I love you. The rest we will figure out together. Marcus made a disgusted sound. You will regret this. When you are living in some shack struggling to make ends meet, you will remember what you gave up. Maybe, Sarah agreed. But I would rather struggle with someone I love than live in comfort with someone I do not. Marcus turned on his heel and stalked back into the house. Sarah heard him shouting for Rosa, likely ordering her to pack Sarah's things. She looked at Jasper, suddenly uncertain. What do we do now? Jasper climbed the steps and took her hands in his. Now we go. I will take you to town, find you a proper place to stay until we can figure things out. I will not have anyone saying I took advantage of you. I do not care what anyone says. I do. I want to do this right, Sarah. I want to court you properly, give you time to be sure. You deserve that. Sarah felt a rush of love so strong it nearly knocked her over. This was why she had chosen him. Not just because of how he made her feel, but because of who he was, a man of honor and principle, even when it cost him. All right, she said. We will do it properly. But Jasper? Yes, I am already sure. He smiled then, really smiled, and Sarah thought it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. He raised her hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles. God knew what he was doing when he sent that storm. I truly believe that. Rosa appeared with Sarah's trunk and carpetbag, her face sympathetic. I am sorry it did not work out, Miss Olsen, but I think maybe you are making the right choice. That one, she nodded at Jasper. He looks at you like you are the sun and the moon. Thank you, Rosa. Jasper loaded Sarah's belongings onto his horse and helped her mount. They rode away from the Pritchard ranch together, and Sarah did not look back. The town of Lano was small but prosperous, with a hotel, a general store, a church, and a scattering of other businesses. Jasper took her to the hotel and paid for a room for a week. "I will come by tomorrow," he promised. "We will talk about what happens next." But before he could leave, Sarah caught his hand. "Thank you for coming for me. Thank you for being brave enough to tell me the truth. I could not help myself. The thought of you marrying him, of never seeing you again, I could not bear it." Jasper cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle. "I love you, Sarah Olsen. I do not know how it happened so fast, but I do." "I love you too," Sarah whispered. Jasper leaned down and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. "I will make you happy, Sarah, I swear it. You already do." The next weeks were a whirlwind. Jasper came to town every day, and they spent hours walking and talking and getting to know each other without the pressure of survival or the complications of her engagement to Marcus. Jasper introduced her to his world, the ranch where he worked, the men he called friends, the land he hoped to buy someday. Sarah showed him the woman she was beneath the Boston polish, her sharp wit, her love of adventure, her determination to make her own way. She got a job helping the schoolteacher, teaching reading and arithmetic to the children of Lano. It did not pay much, but it was honest work and she loved it. They went to church together on Sundays, and the whole town watched their courtship with interest and approval. Jasper was well liked, and the story of how they had met during the blizzard had spread quickly. People seemed to find it romantic, this tale of two people thrown together by fate. Marcus Pritchard made his displeasure known by refusing to do business with anyone who associated with Jasper, but most people ignored his threats. The Triple Z Ranch continued to employ Jasper, and the owner, a crusty old man named Dutch Zimmerman who turned out to be Jasper's uncle, approved of the match wholeheartedly. "About time that boy found himself a good woman," Dutch told Sarah when Jasper brought her to meet him. "He has been alone too long, punishing himself for things that were not his fault." "What things?" Sarah asked. Dutch looked at Jasper, who shook his head. "I will tell her," Jasper said, "but in my own time." That evening, as they sat on the porch of the boarding house where Sarah had moved to save money, Jasper finally told her the rest of his story. "I was engaged once before," he said, staring out at the darkening sky. "Her name was Elizabeth. We grew up together, planned to get married. But then she met a traveling salesman, a man with smooth words and fancy clothes. She left with him, and I never saw her again." He paused. "I heard later that he abandoned her in St. Louis. She wrote to me, asking me to come for her, to forgive her. But I was young and stupid and proud, and I said no. What happened to her? I do not know. She stopped writing. I have carried that guilt ever since, wondering if I could have saved her if my pride cost her everything." Jasper turned to look at Sarah. "I swore I would never care about anyone that deeply again. It was easier to be alone, but then you came along and I could not help myself." Sarah took his hand. "You were hurt. You reacted as any young man would have. You cannot carry that burden forever, Jasper. I know. But it is hard to let go." He squeezed her hand. "You make me want to try, though. You make me want to be better. You are already good. You just need to forgive yourself." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out. After a while, Jasper said, "I have been saving money for 5 years. I almost have enough to buy a piece of land east of town. It is not much, maybe 100 acres, but it has water and good grass. I could run cattle, build a house, make a life." "That sounds wonderful." Jasper turned to her. "I want to make that life with you, Sarah. I want to marry you and build a home together. But I will not ask until I have something real to offer you, until I can give you the security you deserve." "I do not need security, I just need you, I know. But I need to do this right." I need to prove to myself and to you that I can take care of you." Jasper kissed her forehead. "Be patient with me, please." Sarah wanted to argue, but she understood. Jasper needed to feel worthy of her, needed to accomplish this goal he had set for himself. So she agreed to wait, though every day felt like an eternity. In the meantime, they built their relationship on a foundation of friendship and respect. They talked about everything, their hopes and fears, their dreams and disappointments. They learned each other's quirks and habits. Sarah discovered that Jasper could not carry a tune to save his life, but loved to listen to her sing. Jasper learned that Sarah was afraid of spiders but fearless in the face of much larger dangers. The months passed. Summer came, hot and dry, and Sarah learned what it meant to live in Texas. She helped with the church socials and taught her students and saved every penny she could. Jasper worked from dawn to dusk, taking on extra jobs to add to his savings. They saw each other whenever they could, stolen moments that became the highlights of their days. In September, nearly 6 months after the blizzard, Jasper came to Sarah with a gleam in his eye and a rolled-up paper in his hand. "I did it," he said, unable to contain his excitement. "I bought the land. It is ours, Sarah. 120 acres of good ranch land." Sarah threw her arms around him, laughing and crying at the same time. "Jasper, that is wonderful." He picked her up and spun her around, both of them giddy with joy. When he set her down, he took both her hands and dropped to one knee right there in the street, not caring who saw. "Sarah Olsen, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. You are my best friend, my partner, the other half of my heart. I do not have much to offer you except hard work and a stubborn determination to make you happy. But if you will have me, I promise to spend every day of my life showing you that you made the right choice. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Jasper stood and kissed her, deep and long, not caring that half the town was watching and cheering. When they finally broke apart, he pulled a simple gold band from his pocket and slipped it onto her finger. "It was my mother's," he said. "It is all I have of her. I want you to wear it." Sarah looked at the ring, worn smooth by years of wear, and felt the weight of the trust he was placing in her. "I will treasure it always." They were married a week later in the small church, with the whole town in attendance. Dutch Zimmerman gave Sarah away, and the schoolteacher stood up as her matron of honor. Rosa came from the Pritchard Ranch to attend, bringing a beautiful embroidered tablecloth as a gift. Even some of Marcus's ranch hands showed up, defying their boss to celebrate with Jasper. Marcus himself was notably absent, but Sarah did not let that dampen her joy. She stood beside Jasper in her best dress, which she had altered with lace from the general store, and spoke her vows with a clear, strong voice. When the preacher said Jasper could kiss his bride, he did so with such tenderness that Sarah heard several women in the congregation sigh. The celebration afterward was simple but joyful. There was food and music, and someone brought out a fiddle. Jasper, despite his terrible singing voice, danced with Sarah until they were both breathless and laughing. "Are you happy?" he asked as they swayed together to a slow song. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Sarah said honestly. "This is exactly where I am supposed to be. With me. With you." They spent their wedding night in the hotel, a luxury they could barely afford but insisted on anyway. Jasper was gentle and patient, and Sarah discovered that the passion between them was just as strong as the friendship and love. Afterward, lying in his arms, she felt complete in a way she never had before. "I cannot believe I almost married Marcus Pritchard," she murmured. Jasper tightened his arms around her. "God knew what he was doing when he sent that blizzard. You said that before. Do you really believe it?" "I do. I think we were meant to find each other, Maybe not in the way we expected, but sometimes the best things in life come from the unexpected. Sarah lifted her head to kiss him. I am so glad I was on that stage, Coach. So glad it turned around. So glad your line shack was where it was. Me too. Every day I thank God for that storm. They moved to the new land the following week. There was no house yet, just open prairie and a creek that ran clear and cold. Jasper had already started clearing a site for their home, but for now they lived in a tent while they worked to build their future. Sarah had never worked so hard in her life. She helped Jasper clear land, plant a garden, and start construction on a small cabin. Her hands blistered and her back ached, but she did not complain. This was their dream, their future, and she was building it alongside the man she loved. The cabin took shape slowly over the fall and winter. It was nothing fancy, just 2 rooms and a loft, but every nail and board represented their labor and love. By Christmas, they had a roof over their heads and a working fireplace. Sarah made curtains from flour sacks and cooked on an iron stove that Dutch had given them as a wedding present. They invited Dutch and some of their friends from town for Christmas dinner, and Sarah roasted a goose and made all the fixings. It was crowded in their small cabin, but the laughter and warmth made it feel like a palace. You have done well for yourself, boy, Dutch told Jasper, watching Sarah laugh at something one of the wives had said. That is a fine woman you married. I know. I remind myself of that every day. Treat her right and she will make you happy for the rest of your life. I intend to. The new year brought challenges. A hard freeze killed part of their garden, and several of the calves they had bought died despite their best efforts. Money was tight, and there were days when Sarah wondered if they would make it. But Jasper never lost faith, and his determination buoyed her spirits. In the spring, Sarah realized she was pregnant. She told Jasper one evening as they sat on the porch of their cabin watching the sunset. He was so overcome with joy that he could not speak for several moments. When he finally found his voice, it was thick with emotion. A baby, we are going to have a baby. Are you happy? Sarah asked, suddenly nervous. Happy, Sarah, I am overwhelmed, terrified, grateful beyond words. Jasper pulled her into his arms. You have given me everything. A home, a future, and now a child. How did I get so lucky? We got lucky together, Sarah corrected. The pregnancy was not easy. Sarah suffered from terrible morning sickness and exhaustion. Jasper took over most of the heavy work, insisting she rest as much as possible. When her belly began to swell, he built her a rocking chair and placed it on the porch so she could sit and watch him work. In October, nearly a year after the blizzard that had changed their lives, Sarah went into labor. The town midwife, a competent woman named Mrs. Green, came to help, and Jasper paced outside like a caged animal while Sarah labored for 18 hours. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, a baby's cry pierced the air. Mrs. Green opened the door and smiled at Jasper. You have a son, a healthy, strong boy. Jasper rushed inside and found Sarah propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a red-faced bundle. She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. Meet your son, Jasper. Jasper approached cautiously, as if afraid he might break something. He looked down at the tiny face, the miniature fingers curled into fists, and felt his heart expand in his chest. He is perfect, Jasper whispered. You are perfect. Sarah, I love you so much. I love you too. Sarah held out the baby. Hold him. He is your son. Jasper took the baby carefully, cradling him against his chest. The baby stopped fussing and blinked up at him with unfocused eyes. What should we name him? They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now, holding his son, Jasper knew exactly what felt right. James, he said. After my father, James David Zimmerman. James, Sarah repeated, testing the name. I like it, Jamie for short. Jamie, Jasper agreed. He bent to kiss Sarah's forehead. Thank you for this gift. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for coming for me, for fighting for us. The first year of Jamie's life was both the hardest and the most rewarding of Sarah's life. She was exhausted constantly, dealing with a fussy baby and the demands of ranch life. But every time she looked at Jasper with their son, every time she saw the love and wonder in his eyes, she knew it was all worth it. The ranch slowly began to prosper. Jasper's herd grew, and he developed a reputation for raising quality cattle. Sarah started selling eggs and vegetables in town, adding to their income. It was not easy and there were setbacks, but they were building something real and lasting. When Jamie was 2, Sarah became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and she delivered a healthy baby girl after only 6 hours of labor. They named her Mary Rose after Sarah's mother and Jasper's. Jasper was besotted with his daughter, carrying her everywhere and talking to her constantly. Sarah would often find him in the barn with Mary Rose tucked in a sling against his chest while he worked, telling her stories about the cows and horses. "You spoil her," Sarah teased one evening. "She is my little girl. That is my job," Jasper said unrepentantly. Mary Rose gurgled happily and grabbed his finger. Life settled into a rhythm. The children grew, healthy and happy. Jamie became a serious, thoughtful boy who loved to help his father with the ranch work. Mary Rose was a sunny child, always laughing, with her mother's brown eyes and her father's stubborn chin. 3 years after Mary Rose was born, Sarah gave birth to another son whom they named Daniel. He was a fat, happy baby who seemed content just to watch the world go by. The cabin felt too small now with 3 children, so Jasper expanded it, adding 2 more rooms and a larger kitchen. The ranch continued to grow. They hired a hand to help during busy seasons, a young man named Tom who was saving up for his own place. Dutch Zimmerman visited often, delighting in his great-nieces and nephew. He had never married or had children of his own, and he doted on Jasper's family. Sarah sometimes thought about her life in Boston, about the woman she had been before she stepped onto that stagecoach. It felt like a different lifetime, like it had happened to someone else. She was happy in a way she had never imagined possible, content with her life and her choices. One evening when Jamie was 8, Mary Rose was 6, and Daniel was 3. Sarah and Jasper sat on the porch watching the children play in the yard. The ranch house stood solid behind them, the barn and outbuildings in good repair. The herd grazed peacefully in the distance, and their garden was lush with vegetables. "You ever regret it?" Jasper asked suddenly. Sarah looked at him in surprise. "Regret what?" "Choosing me, giving up the security Marcus could have provided." Sarah took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Not for one single moment. How could I regret the best decision I ever made? Some days are hard. We have struggled. We have struggled together, and look at what we have built." Sarah gestured to the children, the ranch, the life they had created. "This is ours, Jasper. Everything we have we earned together. That means something." "It means everything," Jasper agreed. He pulled her close and kissed her temple. "God knew what he was doing when he sent that blizzard. I truly believe that. He knew you needed to find me and I needed to find you." The cowboy smiled and said God knew what he was doing, Sarah quoted softly. "That was the moment I knew for certain I loved you, when you said that after we left the cabin. I meant it then and I mean it now. We were meant to be, Sarah Zimmerman. You and me against the world. Always." They sat together as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. The children's laughter rang out across the yard, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. Sarah rested her head on Jasper's shoulder and felt completely at peace. This was her life now, Not the life she had planned, not the one she had expected, but the one she was meant to have. A life built on love and trust and hard work. A life with a man who saw her not as a means to an end, but as his partner in all things. A life that had begun in a blizzard and bloomed into something more beautiful than she could have imagined. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Jamie grew into a fine young man, tall and serious like his father, but with his mother's quick mind. He took to ranching naturally and often talked about expanding their operation. Mary Rose remained sunny and sweet, becoming the heart of the family with her infectious laughter. Daniel, quiet and observant, surprised everyone by showing a talent for working with horses. When Sarah was 35, she discovered she was pregnant again. It was unexpected. Daniel was already 10, but she and Jasper welcomed the news with joy. This pregnancy was harder than the others, and Sarah was often tired and uncomfortable. But in the spring, she delivered a healthy baby girl with red gold hair and green eyes. "She looks like an angel," Jasper said, holding his newest daughter with the same wonder he had shown with each of his children. "Let us name her Grace then," Sarah suggested. "Grace Elizabeth Zimmerman." "Perfect," Jasper agreed. The ranch was prosperous now. They had over 500 head of cattle and had purchased an additional 200 acres. Jasper had paid off all their debts, and they had money saved for the first time in their married life. Jamie was 20 now, managing much of the day-to-day operations and courting a local girl named Emma who Sarah adored. Mary Rose, at 18, was being courted by Tom, their longtime ranch hand who had become like family. Daniel, at 15, was already being offered top dollar for the horses he trained. Sarah sometimes walked to the spot where the old line shack had been. Jasper had torn it down years ago, building a new, larger one closer to the northern boundary of their expanded property. But Sarah remembered every detail of those 4 days: the sound of the wind, the warmth of the fire, the moment she had first realized she was falling in love one day. As she stood at that spot, Jasper came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. Baby Grace was nearly a year old now, napping back at the house under the watchful eye of her grandmother. Sarah's mother had finally visited from Boston the year before, shocked by her daughter's rustic life, but unable to deny her obvious happiness. "What are you thinking about?" Jasper asked. "The blizzard, the cabin, how strange life is." "Strange how? I thought I was going to marry Marcus Pritchard. I thought my life was planned out, and then the storm came and changed everything." Sarah turned in his arms to face him. "If the storm had not happened, if the stagecoach had made it through, I would have married him. I would have missed all of this, our children, our life together. I would never have known what I was missing. But the storm did happen, and you did not marry him, and we are here together." "God knew what he was doing," Sarah said softly. Jasper smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. "Yes, he did. He knew I needed you. He knew our children needed to exist. He knew this land needed us to work it and love it. You think Marcus ever found happiness?" "I heard he remarried a few years ago, a widow from El Paso. I hope he did find happiness. I have no hard feelings toward him." "Neither do I," Sarah admitted. "He was not the right man for me, but that does not make him a bad man." They stood together in the spot where the cabin had been, holding each other and remembering. 20 years had passed since that blizzard, 20 years of love and laughter and hard work. They were not the same people they had been then. Jasper's hair was shot through with silver now, and Sarah had laugh lines around her eyes, but their love had only deepened with time. "You know what I think about sometimes," Jasper said. "I think about that moment when I opened the door and saw you standing there, soaked and shivering. I thought you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, and I was terrified. Terrified of me, of how I felt. Even then, in that first moment, something in me recognized something in you. I knew you were going to change everything. Jasper cupped her face in his hands. And you did. You changed everything, Sarah. You made me believe in love again. You gave me a family and a purpose beyond just survival. You made my life worth living. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. You did the same for me. You showed me what real partnership looks like, what real love looks like. You never tried to change me or diminish me. You just loved me exactly as I am. That is the easy part. You are very easy to love. They kissed then, slow and sweet, and Sarah thought about how lucky they were. How many marriages started with such uncertainty and grew into something so strong. How many people could say they had found their perfect match, their other half. As they walked back to the house hand in hand, Sarah saw their life spread out before them. Jamie and Emma would marry soon and would likely take over the ranch when Jasper was ready to step back. Mary Rose and Tom would build their own place on the corner of the property Jasper had already deeded to them. Daniel would have his horse operation, and little Grace would grow up surrounded by love and family, never doubting that she was wanted and cherished. This was the life the blizzard had given them. This was the future that had started with 4 days trapped in a cabin, with honest conversations and growing affection, with a choice to follow her heart instead of her plans. Years later, when Sarah was in her 60s and Jasper's hair was completely white, they sat in rocking chairs on the porch of their home and watched their grandchildren play in the yard. There were so many of them now. Jamie and Emma had 5 children, Mary Rose and Tom had 4, and Daniel had married a teacher from town and they had 3. Grace, who had inherited her mother's intelligence and her father's determination, was in college in Austin, studying to be a lawyer. 28 grandchildren, Jasper marveled. How did that happen? You wanted a big family, Sarah reminded him with a smile. I wanted children. I did not realize children had children who had children, Sarah laughed. That is generally how it works. They watched as one of the grandsons, a boy of about 8, came running up to the porch. Grandpa, tell us the story again, about how you and Grandma met. Other children heard the request and came running, gathering around the porch with eager faces. It was their favorite story, one they never tired of hearing. Jasper looked at Sarah, who nodded with a smile. She loved hearing him tell it, loved seeing the way his face softened with memory. Well, Jasper began, it was the winter of 1874 and the worst blizzard in Texas history was raging. I was in my line shack alone when I heard a pounding at the door. Sarah listened as he told the story, embellishing some parts, glossing over others. He talked about the beautiful woman who had appeared out of the storm, about the 4 days they had spent together, about the moment he had realized he could not let her go. And then, what happened? One of the youngest grandchildren asked, even though she had heard the story a dozen times. Then I did the hardest thing I have ever done. I let her go because she had promised to marry another man and I believed in keeping promises. Jasper paused dramatically, but I could not stop thinking about her. For 3 days I tried to forget her, tried to tell myself it was for the best. And then I realized I was being a fool, so you went after her, several children chorused. So I went after her. I rode to her fiancé's ranch and I told her how I felt. And do you know what she did? She chose you, they shouted. She chose me, Jasper confirmed, reaching over to take Sarah's hand. Even though I had nothing to offer her but hard work and uncertainty, even though the other man could have given her an easier life, she chose love over comfort, partnership over security. And then what? This from one of the older granddaughters, who was at the age where romance was endlessly fascinating. Then we got married and built this ranch together. Every fence post, every building, every acre of cleared land, we did it together. And we had children, and our children had children, and now here we all are. Tell them what you said, Sarah prompted softly. About God, Jasper smiled. When we were leaving the cabin and starting our journey together, I looked at your grandmother and I said, God knew what he was doing. Because that blizzard, that impossible storm that trapped us together, that was not an accident. That was divine intervention. God knew we needed each other. He knew all of you needed to exist. So he sent a blizzard to change the course of our lives. The children were quiet, absorbing the story. Then one of the boys said, I am glad there was a blizzard. So are we, Sarah said, squeezing Jasper's hand. So are we. As the sun set and the children scattered to play before supper, Sarah and Jasper remained on the porch, holding hands and watching their legacy run and laugh and live. This was what they had built from that chance meeting, from 4 days in a cabin and a choice to follow their hearts. Have I told you lately that I love you? Jasper asked. Not in the last hour, Sarah teased. Then I am remiss. I love you, Sarah Zimmerman. I have loved you since the moment you walked out of that blizzard and into my life. I will love you until the day I die and beyond. I love you too, Jasper, always and forever. They sat together as darkness fell, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that was rich in all the ways that mattered. They had not had an easy path, but they had walked it together, and that had made all the difference. The blizzard had been brutal, but it had brought them together. The choice had been terrifying, but it had been the right one. And now, decades later, surrounded by the evidence of their love in the form of children and grandchildren and a thriving ranch, they could look back and know with absolute certainty that every struggle, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt had been worth it. God had known what he was doing. And so had they.